Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting us to give this short commentary on banks in the democratic economic planning debate. My name is Solveig Degen. I'm a master's student at Vienna University of Economics and Business, and I'm writing my master's thesis on public banks for public provisioning. And I work at the Institute for Spatial and Socio-Ecological Transformations.
Thanks, Solveig. My name's Walther Zeug. I am working at the Helmholtz Center for Environmental Research in Germany, in Leipzig. I developed the holistic and integrated life cycle sustainability assessment method, which we and my colleague Jakob Heyer now want to apply for models of democratic economic planning.
Yes, this will be the outline for our presentation. So, a short introduction to the democratic economic planning debate. Recent years have seen a resurgent debate on economic planning in the age of digitalization and climate crisis, and a dynamic and diverse research community has formed around the theme of planning. And although economic planning is mostly or has mostly been equated with Soviet-era central planning, this democratic economic planning debate formed around the insight that economic planning can also be decentralized, democratic, and also market complementary. The democratic economic planning debate is thus a specific strand in the research debate on planning, and distances itself from approaches of progressive industrial planning, centralized planning, but also models of market socialism. It has mainly two objectives. Firstly, to overcome economic coordination through independently acting atomistic actors and other market forces, as it's currently the case in capitalism, and instead move towards re-embedding economic coordination in radical democratic deliberation and facilitate an ex-ante economic coordination, which Walter will also go more into detail later in their model. And these contributions often build on popular democratic coordination models from the 1980s and 90s, such as Pat Devine's model of democratic negotiation, or Cockshott and Contrail's cyber socialism, or Albert and Harnell's participatory economics model. For more information, you can go on the newly founded International Network for Democratic Economic Planning website. They have also resources. So in this talk, we want to discuss the role of finance in democratic economic planning debate. And an important question is, why talk about finance in a debate on post-capitalist democratically planned economy? And we think there are three reasons for this. First, because finance is already a dominant way capitalism plans. This is why it is an important tool for transformation towards GDP in the current order. And then it's also important to consider the role of banks in post-capitalist democratic economic coordination models, such as the one Walter and Jakob are currently developing. And I'm going to talk about the first two now. So first, this point that finance is already a form of economic planning. We start with this first point, why finance can be considered a form of economic planning. Christoph Sorg develops this notion of finance as a form of economic planning in a recently published paper. It's a big reading recommendation of mine. And he argues that we should consider the financial system as one of the ways capitalism plans, because it has a lot of influence on directing economic production capacity and therefore strongly influences how contemporary economic planning works. He differentiates between private and public forms of economic planning in capitalism. Private economic planning entails private investment decisions and the internal planning of production processes within corporations, while public planning refers to macroeconomic management by states, including the creation of money, provision of legal frameworks, securing market stability, and also facilitating public investments. And he highlights this interdependence of private and public planning and argues that, they kind of have an interrelated relationship. And he argues, quote, public planning shapes the arenas for atomistic corporate planning, which in turn creates market forces that readjust the playing field for future public and corporate planning. And I kind of try to visualize this in the graph on the right. And he also points out that this interrelation is fundamentally crisis-prone, as corporations undertake these decisions independently and to compete for the largest market share, which often leads to first access and consequent scrapping of economic capacity, which creates systemic uncertainty and must be dealt ex post by states through public planning. And DP models fundamentally want to overcome this crisis-ridden tendency of current economic planning and capitalism by developing a post-capitalist and democratic alternative which promotes ex-ante decision and thus gets kind of rid of this systemic uncertainty. And important tools to reach this is the planning of productive capacity through socializing investment, also a point raised by, for example, Pat Devine or Aaron Bananoff. So a few measures for democratizing finance and socializing investment. I've been working on this with a colleague of mine, Olivia Hinz, and we will collected a few of these measures in a soon-to-be published working paper. This work mainly builds on insights by Fred Block, Robert Hockett, and David Rudolph as they formulated it in the Democratizing Finance book, but also on recent work by Daniela Braun or Benjamin Brown. And we identify 3 key entry points for such measures, namely retail banks, capital markets, and central banks. And now we're going to go over just a few of these measures. So on retail bank level, democratization could be achieved through measures to expand non-profit public retail banks. This could, for example, be facilitated by establishing favorable lending rules or introduce a government matching capitalization program for newly founded non-profit retail banks. Also a suggestion discussed by Fred Block. Then retail banks for socializing investment should, we argue, adopt a different set of indicators, for example, as suggested in the holistic life cycle assessment method for credit allocation to prioritize foundational and local projects, which are directed at socio-ecological objectives. And this could go together with enhancing public cooperation between public provisioning systems and public banks. Also, we think that the governance structures of public retail banks should be more democratized to ensure more transparency and participation in these processes. These insights mainly build on this endogenous view of monetary creation, where we just assume that retail banks act as credit. They can create credit just by deeming which investments are profitable, but it doesn't have to be connected to this notion of for profit. Then democratizing capital markets could involve expanding non-profit investment banks and democratizing public investment banks to channel resources into public and non-profit ventures, and also could entail creating a non-profit innovation stock market, also suggested by Fred Block, to support transformative projects or establishing sovereign citizen wealth funds. And all these measures would work towards aiming towards socializing investment. Together these measures would also facilitate this, but they're necessarily limited if not connected to changes in the central bank system. And here we propose, first of all, putting an end to central bank independence and increasing democratic oversight through connection to parliamentary bodies or new institutions, as, for example, also argued for by Daniela Gabor, Benjamin Brown, or also Boudroff. Then we also make this case for adopting lender of last resort rules and bailout rules, for example, by making socialization compulsory and making socialization and non-profit orientedness compulsory after bailout. It could also involve direct qualitative regulation, for example, which is, for example, also suggested by Christoph Org et al. I think they will also later talk at this workshop, and prioritizing credit allocation to foundational sectors. This should then also go hand in hand with imposing strict restrictions on lending that exacerbates systemic risks, such as mergers, acquisitions, and investments in the fossil fuel industry. So just as a preliminary conclusion, democratizing finance could induce necessary macrofinancial changes, creating structural disadvantages for private and profit-oriented investment, backed by an independent central bank. And it's an important addition to fiscal measures to facilitate socio-ecological transformation. And we argue that, yeah, by prioritizing nonprofit investments via public nonprofit democratically governed banks can strengthen public provisioning, and this could create a form of positive feedback loop, as also I try to visualize in this graph on the right.
Yes, thanks, Solveig. So I will try to give you an idea on when this transformation has gone on for many decades, in which of democratic economic planning could look like, and you will see in the end that banks will be needed nevertheless, however, in a different form as we know them today. So, what is the role of prices and units of accounts in democratic economic planning? Neurath, more than 100 years, stated that a common denominator, such as money or one unit, is pseudo-rational, since we have an incommensurability of different aspects. In the newer debates, Fettes and Pendergrass build on this and make clear that there are trade-offs between uncommensurable goals, such as land use of solar, where we have emissions on the one hand side, but biodiversity conservation on the other hand side as conflicting fields, which cannot be put into one unit in general. So we have the challenge of a multi-criteria decision making without having one unified criteria of accounting. Which leads to the still unsolved question for the unit of account, and of course, which institutions should do such an accounting. For this, we think cybernetics, as the science of control and regulation of complex systems, can play a very big role, since our model of democratic economic planning relies on parameters and rules of interaction between subsystems, as well as feedback loops and iterative coordination. Local units on the decentral level must be enabled by information in the system to assess the consequences of their doing in the overall system, so which societal and ecological consequences this has. And that's why we think the importance is to integrate elements of democratic central planning with decentral regulation of this then nevertheless relatively autonomous operating firms. How does the economy usually look like? Usually it looks like that. So in terms of processes for producing something, we have a complex system of energy supplies, transportation, manufacturing, use, maintenance, and so on and so forth. And this complex system of processes can be simplified as processes which are interlinked with each other. So these production systems include physical and social systems, and they mediate the relationship between natural resources and social needs. So that means these processes have energies and materials as inputs and products and emissions as outputs. But as well, we have work or capital as socioeconomic inputs, and the ecological, economic, and social impacts on planetary boundaries, economy, or social needs are as well an effect of these production systems. Now, with HILSA, the good news is that we can measure this directly by measuring the socioeconomic inputs, material and energy flows, as well as those socio-ecological and economic impacts by the HILCSA, that means the Holistic and Integrated Life Cycle Sustainability Assessment method. This method is database and software based as an input-output modeling, which already includes more than 20,000 processes. We can measure these socioeconomic inputs and material balances by over 100 qualitative and quantitative indicators. And by this can also provide a tool later in term of democratic economic planning for a detailed natural and social accounting, as well as economic network building. If we consider socioeconomic and as well as planetary boundaries, which also can be regional, um, accounting would mean to break them down. And this breaking down of planetary boundaries is called downscaling and allocation. And it can be scaled down and broken down to per capita values. And you can see here just as an example which per capita values we would have. And we consider as sustainable. So it is 5 tons of raw material consumption, 1 ton of CO2, and a budget of 350 hours of working time per capita per year, which would be one first assumption for a sustainable budget of socioeconomic and natural resources. The question, however, is how to upscale and allocate these per capita per year values again to economic sectors. For this, we established a concept and model of a decentral central democratic economic planning, which consists out of 3 levels. The first level is the level of central planning and control and regulation. We think that democratic macro plans are needed to specify general priorities and to steer investments. However, these proportions and parameters for sectors and regions have to be broken down by a sectoral central planning, which is comprehensive and has central physical outputs targets. Outside the centrally planned sector, we have not just something like a political top-down coordination, but a cybernetic and parametric control and regulation within such a framework from which local units and plans can act autonomously. And the mediation is done by the second middle level of scientific holistic overall accounting. In this level, we think there should be established a holistic and transparent method of accounting, which is crucial for the cybernetic and ecological planning system. It has to be continuously fed with real-time data. It should symbolically describe and model this economic system and its metabolic processes. And for this, we need synthetic indicators. And these synthetic indicators are aggregated units which are there to reduce complexity, but show nevertheless a comparability of those relations between inputs and outputs, costs, performances, benefits, and so on and so forth. That means at the end, we need both disaggregation and aggregation. And the goal is a differentiated and multidimensional but however, also complexity reducing system of parameters, indicators, and accounting. You could also call it a socialist price system. By this, we can quantify, weight, and combine horizontally as also vertically a wide range of economic, biophysical, and social dimensions and indicators. On the third level of decentral planning of production and consumption, the local units are self-managed enterprises which plan, coordinate, and act autonomously. However, they do that within macro plans and ecological and economic budgets. All information from these units is on inputs and outputs and stocks and performances is recorded by the LCA methodology and aggregated and in a bigger structure on a sectoral and global level by input-output datasets and integrated to a database. This multi-level iterative coordination process thereby ensures the convergence of macro and micro plans, as Leitman identified it as crucial. This budgeting and incentivization by tokens, as we call them, enables us to come up with a system of cost prices and clearing prices. And these tokens themselves are non-circulating units of account that reflect the information about holistic costs. That means the scarcity and the utility of products. However, they also enable consumers to freely consume according to their own needs within the limited budgets we all agreed on. Okay, how can this be operationalized in detail. As I said, we have three main indicators. One is called raw material consumption, the other is CO2 and working time. And the economy-wide budgets can be broken down to individual budgets, as I showed before. And these budgets have to be allocated to four economic sectors: individual consumption, reserves, care, infrastructure services, as well as productive consumption. All these four economic sectors need to consume goods. And we here say, first of all, unpersonal goods, so materials, energies, products which are not impersonal services such as care work. These goods have to be produced by a production system, and this production system produces products with amounts. And all these products and their production has specific measurable impacts on working time, CO2 emissions, and raw material consumption. That means on the societal and planetary boundaries. With this information for the product-specific impacts, we then can calculate economy-wide impacts as the sum of all products times their amounts for this very economy. This information can then be compared again to the sustainable budgets we identified before. And it is sustainable if the measured impacts are according to the budgets we identified before. If not, an adaptation of these sectors and the production system itself has to take place. We can also calculate single product prices. These single product prices are the share of let's say, the environmental, social, and economic costs of a product related to the budget. And these single product prices can incentivize the consumption again to stay within planetary and socio-economic boundaries. As well as we can also derive economy-wide product prices, which represent the share of product-specific impacts and their amounts in terms not only to the per capita budgets, but to the budgets of the economy in general. The simplest form of such an holistic accounting would appear to us as a consumer, let's say, in a democratic economic planning, as something like an aggregated information about the costs or the efforts which have to be taken to produce a specific product in terms of these three dimensions. Yeah, so to conclude, you could ask, or one could propose the question, what do banks actually do when there is no more money or capitalism left at all? But I think, and we think, that they should do what they could do best. And this means a democratically controlled and transparent accounting of tokens, budgets, and prices, but on a basis of material, energy, and socio-economic flows for the greater good and not for individual profit. Yeah, thanks for staying with us. Feel free to have a look at the references and further readings here of Solveig's contents, and as well, if you like, on the contents of me and Jacob. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us via mail, and we are looking forward to any exchange. Thanks, and see you soon. Bye.
Goodbye. Bye.